The alarm clock pierced through the darkness at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to ring. Maya's hand shot out from under the covers, silencing it with practiced precision. She lay there for exactly 13 seconds, eyes closed, breathing deeply, before throwing off the blanket and swinging her legs onto the cold hardwood floor. This had been her routine for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The bathroom light flickered on, harsh and unforgiving. Maya studied her reflection while brushing her teeth, the same 2 minutes and 30 seconds she'd given this task every morning since she'd read that article about dental hygiene. Her face looked tired, perhaps a little older than her 32 years suggested it should. Dark circles had taken up permanent residence under her eyes, and her cheekbones seemed sharper than they'd been when she started this journey. But she wasn't doing this to look pretty. She was doing this to become great. By 5:15 a.m., Maya was at her desk in the corner of her studio apartment, laptop glowing in the pre-dawn darkness. She opened her manuscript file, the same one she'd opened every single morning for the past 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. The word count at the bottom read 487,329 words. She'd written every single one of them during these early morning sessions, 1,000 words per day, no exceptions, no excuses. Not when she had the flu. Not when her father died. Not when her best friend got married in Bali and she'd had to write on her phone during the reception, hiding in a bathroom stall while the celebration continued without her. The novel was about a woman who built an empire through sheer determination, who never wavered, who understood that success was nothing more than the mathematical outcome of repeated action over time. Maya poured herself into those pages, her philosophy crystallized into narrative form. By 7 a.m., she'd written her 1,000 words. She saved the file, backed it up to 3 separate cloud services, and closed her laptop. The morning routine continued. A protein smoothie she'd perfected to contain exactly 437 calories, a 30-minute workout video she'd memorized every movement of, and a cold shower that she'd read stimulated discipline and willpower. She arrived at the advertising agency where she worked at 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early as always. Her coworkers had stopped inviting her to happy hours 2 years ago. They'd stopped asking about her weekends 18 months ago. Now they just nodded politely when she walked past, this strange intense woman who never seemed to participate in birthday cakes or baby showers or the small human moments that made the workday bearable. Maya didn't mind. They were distractions. Every minute spent pretending to care about someone's vacation photos was a minute stolen from her purpose. At lunch, while others congregated in the break room, Maya sat at her desk eating her precisely portioned meal prep and reading the next chapter of her current self-improvement book. This month it was about neuroplasticity and habit formation. Last month had been about the psychology of expertise. The month before that, ancient Stoic philosophy. She took detailed notes in a system she developed, cross-referencing concepts, building a personal database of wisdom that would fuel her eventual success. The information went into her second brain, a digital repository she'd spent countless hours organizing. Surely, she thought, all of this accumulated knowledge had to amount to something. Surely the universe was keeping score. After work, Maya went to the library where she'd reserved the same quiet study room she used every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. She spent 3 hours editing the previous week's writing, her red pen marking up the printed pages with the fury of someone who believed that perfection was achievable through sufficient iteration. At 8:30 p.m., she attended her online creative writing workshop, the expensive one with the semi-famous instructor who'd published 2 novels with a mid-tier press. Maya never missed a session. She completed every assignment with meticulous care. She implemented every piece of feedback, tracking her progress in a detailed spreadsheet that color-coded her improvement across 17 different writing metrics she'd invented. The instructor had once told her, gently, that she might be overthinking things. That sometimes art needed to breathe, needed space, needed the writer to live a little before the words could come alive. Maya had nodded politely and promptly disregarded the advice. She knew the truth. Consistency was the only teacher that mattered. Show up every day, do the work, and results would inevitably follow. It was mathematics. It was physics. It was the fundamental law of the universe. Dinner at 9:15 p.m. was another precisely calculated meal. As she ate, Maya scrolled through social media, something she allowed herself for exactly 15 minutes as a reward. Her feed was full of other writers celebrating book deals, agents announcing new clients, publishers revealing cover designs. She felt the familiar twist in her stomach, that toxic mixture of envy and confusion. These people didn't seem to work as hard as she did. Their posts were full of wine glasses and beach vacations and lazy Sunday mornings. Where was their discipline? Where was their consistency? Yet they were succeeding where she was still waiting. Maya closed the app at precisely 9:30 p.m. Social media beyond the allocated time was a rule violation, and she never violated her rules. Rules were the scaffolding that held her life together, the infrastructure of the success that was surely, inevitably coming. Before bed, she journaled for 20 minutes, documenting her day, analyzing her progress, setting intentions for tomorrow. She'd filled 43 notebooks with this nightly practice. Sometimes she'd flip back through the old ones, reading entries from years ago, looking for some sign of evolution, some evidence of growth. The entries all sounded the same determination, the same discipline, the same absolute certainty that she was on the right path. Just a matter of time now, she'd written hundreds of times. Just need to keep going. At 10:30 p.m., lights out. 7 hours and 17 minutes until the alarm would shatter the darkness again. This had been her life for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. On the morning of the 3-year, 2-month, and 17th day, something changed. The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes early as it always did. Maya's hand shot out to silence it, but instead of her usual 13 seconds of repose, she found herself lying there in the darkness, unable to move. Not from physical paralysis, from something else, a weight that seemed to press down on her chest, heavy and suffocating. She thought about the manuscript waiting on her laptop. 487,329 words that no agent wanted to represent. She'd sent out 247 queries over the past year. She'd received 193 rejections and 54 non-responses. The form letters had varied in their gentleness, but the message was always the same: no thank you. Your concept doesn't fit our list. The voice didn't quite work for me. I'm not connecting with the protagonist. I'm afraid I'll have to pass. Maya had analyzed each rejection, trying to extract actionable feedback, but most offered nothing concrete. A few agents had requested the full manuscript, and she'd waited weeks in breathless anticipation, only to receive brief, polite passes. One had written, "You're clearly a disciplined writer, but I'm not sure what this book is trying to say. It feels more like an exercise than a story." She'd read that line 56 times, trying to decode it, trying to understand what it meant. But understanding required she admit something she'd spent 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days refusing to acknowledge. The morning light began to seep around her blackout curtains. Maya remained in bed, motionless. She thought about her coworkers who'd stopped inviting her anywhere. Her friends who'd slowly drifted away, tired of her refusals, exhausted by her intensity. Her mother who called every Sunday and asked, with increasing sadness in her voice, if Maya was taking care of herself, if Maya was happy. Maya always said yes. She had her routine, she had her discipline, she had her consistency. But lying there in the growing light, a question crept into her mind like water through a crack: what if consistency without joy was just another form of prison? She thought about her novel, this thing she'd poured 3 years of mornings into. She tried to remember the last time she'd felt actual excitement while writing it, the last time the words had flowed from some deep place of genuine inspiration rather than grim obligation. She couldn't remember. Somewhere along the way, writing had stopped being something she loved and had become something she had to do, a box to check, a metric to hit. 1,000 words per day. Every day, no exceptions. But what if exceptions were where life actually happened? Maya sat up in bed. The clock read 5:47 a.m. She'd missed her writing window. The thought should have filled her with panic, but instead she felt something else. Something that might have been relief. She walked to her laptop and opened the manuscript file. 487,329 words stared back at her. She read the last page she'd written, then scrolled back further, reading randomly selected passages. The prose was technically proficient. Every sentence was grammatically correct. The structure was solid, the pacing calculated, the character arcs precisely engineered. And it was completely, utterly lifeless. She could see it now, this thing she'd been too close to see before. Her novel read like an instruction manual written by someone who'd studied the components of story but had forgotten why people told stories in the first place. There was no mess in it, no risk, no real human vulnerability. Just the careful execution of someone who'd confused discipline with wisdom. Maya closed the laptop. She walked to her window and pulled open the blackout curtains. The city was waking up outside, people starting their days in 1,000 different ways, messy and imperfect and alive. She thought about the instructor's comment about needing to live a little. At the time, it had seemed like weak advice, the kind of thing unsuccessful people said to justify their lack of discipline. But maybe, there was something there she'd been too rigid to hear. Consistency never goes resultless, she'd always believed. But what if she'd been consistent at the wrong things? What if she'd been so focused on the daily repetition that she'd never stopped to ask whether the thing she was repeating was worth doing? For the first time in 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days, Maya didn't write that morning. Instead, she made coffee and sat by the window and watched the sun rise. She didn't journal about it or analyze it or try to extract a lesson from it. She just sat there, present, breathing. The next morning, she slept until 7 a.m. Her body, finally allowed to rest, collapsed into the relief like a person falling into water. When she woke, she didn't immediately reach for her laptop. She lay there and asked herself a question she'd been avoiding: what do I actually want? Not what she should want. Not what successful people wanted. Not what would look impressive on a book jacket someday. What did Maya want? The answer came slowly, carefully, like something emerging from a long hibernation. She wanted to write something true. She wanted to connect with people. She wanted friends she could be spontaneous with. She wanted to stop feeling like her life was an exam she was constantly failing despite perfect attendance. She wanted to be a person, not a productivity machine. That day, Maya did something she hadn't done in years. She called in sick to work, even though she wasn't physically ill. She walked to a coffee shop she'd passed 1,000 times but never entered because it wasn't part of her routine. She ordered something she'd never tried before. She sat at a wobbly table and opened a notebook and wrote without a word count goal, without a timer, without any plan at all. She wrote about a woman who'd forgotten how to live, who'd built a prison out of discipline and called it ambition, who'd confused the map for the territory, the routine for the journey, the daily grind for actual growth. The words came differently than they had in her manuscript. They were rougher, more honest, more confused. They weren't trying to prove anything or demonstrate technique. They were just trying to tell the truth. Maya wrote until her hand cramped. Then she ordered another coffee and called her best friend, the one who'd gotten married in Bali, the one she'd been too busy to talk to for months. "Hey," Maya said when she answered. "I know it's been forever. I know I've been terrible. But I'm wondering if you want to get dinner sometime. I have so much I want to tell you." Her friend was quiet for a moment. Then, "I would love that. I've missed you." Maya felt something break open in her chest, something that had been locked tight for years. Over the following weeks, Maya's rigid routine dissolved. Not into chaos, but into something more organic. She still woke early some mornings to write, but only when she felt called to, only when the words wanted to come. Other mornings, she slept in or went for a walk or met a friend for breakfast. She abandoned her 487,329-word manuscript. It hurt, the way it hurts to release something you've invested in heavily, but it also felt like setting down a weight she'd been carrying for far too long. Instead, she started something new. A memoir about discipline, obsession, and the difference between dedication and delusion. She wrote it in coffee shops and parks, on napkins and in notebooks, without tracking word counts or maintaining spreadsheets. She wrote it slowly, letting it breathe, letting herself live between the sentences. 6 months later, she showed a draft to her writing instructor, the one who'd told her she needed to live a little. "This," the instructor said, eyes bright, "this is what I knew you had in you. This is real." Maya didn't query agents immediately. She took her time, revised without obsessing, let the work mature. She reconnected with old friends, started dating someone she met at a reading, learned to cook something other than precisely portioned meal prep. She discovered that consistency mattered, yes, but not the mechanical consistency of forcing action regardless of meaning. The consistency that mattered was showing up to your life with honesty, returning again and again to what was true, being reliably yourself even when that self was still figuring things out. When she finally did send out queries, 18 months after abandoning her original manuscript, 3 agents requested the full. 2 offered representation. She signed with the one who told her, "This book made me cry. It's going to help a lot of people." The book sold at auction. It came out to strong reviews. Critics called it bracingly honest and a necessary corrective to hustle culture. But the success, when it came, felt different than Maya had imagined during those years of grinding routine. It wasn't a validation of her worth or proof that she'd been right all along. It was simply a nice thing that happened because she'd finally stopped trying to engineer outcomes and had started telling the truth instead. On the morning her book released, Maya woke naturally, without an alarm. She made coffee and sat by her window and watched the city wake up. She thought about the person she'd been, that woman who'd believed consistency was a formula you could apply to guarantee results. She understood now what she'd missed. Consistency without consciousness was just repetition. Consistency without course correction was just stubbornness. Consistency without joy was just slow suffering. Real consistency was showing up to life and work with presence and honesty, day after day, even when you had to admit you'd been on the wrong path. Real consistency was being faithful to growth, not to a rigid plan. Real consistency was trying, failing, learning, adjusting, and trying again, better informed and more human each time. Consistency never went resultless, Maya still believed. But the results weren't always what you expected when you started. Sometimes the result of years of discipline was learning that you needed less discipline and more wisdom. Sometimes the result of relentless grinding was discovering that you needed to stop grinding and start listening. Sometimes the result of doing everything right was learning what right actually meant. Maya picked up her phone and texted her friend, "Coffee this morning?" The reply came immediately, "Yes." The usual place. Maya smiled. She had a usual place now. She had friends she saw regularly. She had a life that existed outside of optimization and metrics and the desperate pursuit of some future version of success. She had finally learned what she'd been too consistent to discover before, that the real work wasn't forcing yourself to show up the same way every day regardless of what your life needed. The real work was showing up truly, consistently true, which sometimes meant showing up differently, softer, more willing to admit you'd been wrong. That, Maya had learned, was where the real results lived. Not in the grinding, but in the growing. Not in the forcing, but in the finding. Not in the desperate consistency of someone trying to prove something, but in the gentle consistency of someone learning to be human. If Maya's journey resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more honest stories about growth and authenticity. Comment below. Have you ever been trapped in a routine that stopped serving you?